Well, welcome back. And on Think Tank today, we delve into Lebanon's most critical test since the Maritime Border Agreement, a moment defined by political fragmentation, regional pressures, and a shadow of war. To unpack the implications and explore possible outcomes, we are joined by two distinguished guests from Beirut, Mr. Ahmed Yunus, researcher and political analyst, and from Cairo, we're joined by Mr. Mohammed Osmani, international relations specialist. Together, they will unpack the multifaceted tension points from the US and Israel's role to Hezbollah's influence in regional dynamics, offering insights into what lies ahead for Lebanon. Their insights will guide us through the layered complexity of Lebanon's crossroads, from diplomacy to deterrence and from paralysis to potential escalation. Now, welcome to both of you, gentlemen, and let me start by Mr. Yunus. And Mr. Yunus, according to recent reports, Lebanese Parliament Speaker Nabi Berri confirmed the collapse of the American paper talks. What does this mean for Lebanon's diplomatic posture, and to what extent its collapse could be a turning point?
Good evening to you and to your audience. Thank you for having me in this interview. The collapse of the American paper talks means that the diplomatic initiative led by Washington to ease tensions between Lebanon, Israel, and Hezbollah has failed. This paper was supposed to outline steps towards border stability, limiting Hezbollah's military presence near the south, and reviving political dialogue in Beirut. So its failure shows that the U.S. efforts to manage the Lebanese crisis through negotiations have reached a dead end, largely because both local and regional players remain divided on core security and sovereignty issues. So for Lebanon's diplomatic, posture, I think that this collapse weakens Beirut's ability to present itself as a stable of cooperative partner to the international community. So it exposes the deep divisions between the state and Hezbollah, and between also the political blocs disagree on how to deal with external pressure. So the result is a perception that Lebanon is once again a reactive player, not a decision maker. So we see that it is relying on others to shape its security future rather than driving the process itself. At the same time, we see that the failure of the talks could push Lebanon to look for alternative mediators, possibly France, Qatar, or even the United Nations, to fill the vacuum left by Washington's retreat. So it might also encourage internal dialogue among Lebanese parties, though that remains difficult given the mistrust and the polarization that dominate local politics. So the political elite, if we can say, may try to use this moment to redefine Lebanon's diplomatic priorities, but doing so requires consensus that still seems out of reach.
And we'll speak about that. However, we may question the ability of the alternatives you spoke about, and if they were strong enough to push for other alternative choices. Let me go to Mr. Osman first, and how your interpretation to the collapse of the US-sponsored American paper, and was it ever a viable roadmap from the very beginning for Lebanon's stability?
Thank you for having me, Mona. Greetings to you, your guest, and the dear audience. Of course, this agreement was entirely a non-starter since or this proposal by the United States was a non-starter from the beginning. It was divisive. It was completely biased to the Israeli viewpoint. Basically, the United States adopted Israel's view or resolution, perceived resolution for the situation in Lebanon, and coated it and covered it and wrapped it in an American flag and presented it to the Lebanese actors, whether the Lebanese president, the Lebanese cabinet, or even to Hezbollah and parliament. So, of course, this was a recipe for disaster at the end of the day, because it actually went way beyond the ceasefire agreement between Hezbollah or between Lebanon and Israel.
All right. Until we get back to Mr. Osman, let me go to Mr. Yunus. And Mr. Yunus, Washington's approach, is it, from your point of view, a diplomatic push or coercive pressure campaign on Beirut?
Washington's approach towards Lebanon can be described as, we can say, that a mix of diplomacy and pressure. But in reality, it leans more towards a coercive campaign than a genuine diplomatic push. So the U.S. is trying to influence Beirut's political and security choices by linking aid, sanctions, and international support to specific conditions, mainly limiting Hezbollah's role in southern Lebanon and strengthening the Lebanese army as the only armed force. So this method gives the impression of diplomacy, but its tools are based on pressure rather than partnership. From Washington perspective, for example, this pressure is meant to stabilize Lebanon by reducing the risk of war with Israel. So, however, the approach overlooks the complex internal balance of power inside the country. Lebanon is not a unified actor. Decisions are divided between the government, political factions, and Hezbollah, so which has its own regional alliances. As a result, we can say that the American pressure often deepens divisions instead of building a consensus and makes dialogues between Lebanese groups more difficult. For many Lebanese, for example, and I am a Lebanese, especially within the resistance camp, U.S. Policy feels less like diplomacy and more like an attempt to impose political control. So sanctions on key figures, financial restrictions, and threats to cut aid are seen as tools to reshape Lebanon's internal landscape rather than support its sovereignty. So this perception, I think, that has reduced Washington's credibility as a neutral mediator and fueled anti-American sentiment among certain segment of society.
Right. Mr. Osman, back to you and back to what we were speaking about, and if this American paper was a viable one since the beginning, plus, of course, the U.S. invite on Barak's warning that Israel might act unilaterally if Lebanon delays this armament step. Please.
Apologies on account of the technical glitches. As I was saying, I don't know where I was cut off, but I will just recap very quickly what my ideas about pertaining to your first question. This agreement or this proposal by the Americans is completely biased to the Israeli viewpoint and does not take into account the very peculiar composition of the political system of Lebanon and its very confessional and sectarian nature. What the United States is proposing is the complete and utter disarmament of Hezbollah without going through the needed channels of political consensus in Lebanon, as if this should be dictated on the Lebanese side. And this goes beyond the ceasefire agreement between Lebanon and Israel that ended the war between Israel and Hezbollah in the fall of 2024. It was supposed, according to the agreement, only the southern part of the Litani River was to be disarmed and evacuated by Hezbollah. However, now there seems to be a push by the Americans through this paper they have proposed and through applying immense pressure on the Lebanese side in order to forcefully even disarm Hezbollah and giving the Lebanese government the choice between basically igniting a civil war by attempting to disarm Hezbollah by force or refraining from doing anything and allowing Israel or providing Israel with the pretext to carry out another aggression against Lebanon. And this brings me to the question about Tom Barak's very provocative statements. And indeed, they do have credence, and unfortunately, they do reflect a reality on the ground. Since this ceasefire has went into effect, Israel has targeted Lebanon on an almost daily basis. Over 200 Lebanese people have died in Israeli attacks, half of them civilians, and the other half are Hezbollah. Hezbollah in southern Lebanon, for example. So it became an everyday affair, an ordinary occurrence in Lebanon, these Israeli strikes, whether in southern Lebanon, and even sometimes in the Bekaa Valley, and on a few occasions, the airstrikes even targeted the southern suburbs of Beirut, the Dahya area. So this is a very clear provocation. So unfortunately, the Israelis might find a pretext in order to escalate against Lebanon. We have seen the Israeli military maneuvers in the Galil region a few days ago, even though these are regular annual drills. However, the Israelis wanted to convey a message that now, since the war is frozen in Gaza, at least, that they are ready to move once more in Lebanon if need be. And on the other hand, it's only natural for Hezbollah to be more reasonable because Lebanon is a sovereign nation state that has an army that is responsible for the protection of its borders. So Hezbollah needs to be more flexible about the question of disarmament and engage in constructive dialogue and stop succumbing to the Iranian pressure and stop being an agent of the Iranian interests, basically, because whenever there is a breakthrough or an imminent breakthrough in talks between Hezbollah and its political opponents in Lebanon, namely the government, usually Lebanon is paid a visit by a senior Iranian official, and suddenly the entire agreement explodes, and we find Naim Qasim coming out and releasing very harsh and provocative statements. On the other hand, even threatening civil war on more than one occasion. And this is completely irresponsible on the part of Hezbollah. Lebanon is in dire need for a sensible, realistic national dialogue based on the sole national interest of the Lebanese people, and all of the equations of alliances with regional and international actors needs to be sidelined for once. This has been the history of Lebanon since the mid-19th century, foreign meddling and regional meddling destroying this country and depriving it of any form of prosperity whatsoever.
Let me take it from this point to Mr. Yunus, Mr. Osman. And Mr. Yunus, as you heard here, Mr. Mohammed Osman, from an internal standpoint or from a domestic standpoint, how does Lebanon's political paralysis weaken its negotiating position?
Lebanon's political paralysis severely weakens its negotiation position because it prevents the country from speaking with one clear and unified voice. So the government, the parliament, and major political blocs are divided over almost every issue, from the presidency to the role of Hezbollah and foreign policy. When there is no national consensus, any foreign power engaging with the Lebanon faces the confusion about who truly represents the state's official stance. So this lack of clarity makes Beirut appear fragile and unreliable in diplomatic talks. So moreover, the absence of an active president and a fully functioning cabinet means that Lebanon cannot take quick or decisive actions during a critical
But
negotiations. For example,
there is an acting president and government here, Mr. Yunus. We're speaking about the domestic issue in terms of the influence, the leverage of some sects inside Lebanon, and the influence and the leverage of other states interfering in the domestic affairs of Lebanon. This is what we're speaking about here.
Yes, for example, let us talk about, for example, when proposals such as the American paper are presented, internal divisions delay responses or produce conflicting messages. This is slow, for example, and fragmented decision make a process gives foreign actors like the US, France, or Israel more leverage to dictate terms, knowing that Lebanese leaders are too divided to resist or to propose a strong alternative. So the paralysis also erodes confidence among Lebanon's allies and international institutions. So donors, for example, and the mediators hesitate to commit support when they see that the political factions prioritize personal or sectarian interests over the national unity. Mm-hmm. Without a stable political front, Lebanon loses the diplomatic credibility needed to negotiate from a position of strength, whether on the border, security, economic recovery, or international aid. So the domestic paralysis turns from an active negotiator into a passive reception of others' decisions. So to regain influence, Lebanon must rebuild internal cohesions, elect a president, and
there is a president. There is a president, Mr. Yunus. There is an elected president already.
I mean the
and
president,
that happened for the very first time since years in Lebanon.
Yes, the president now, his stance or his he is in a confusion part. Why he tried to support the
you can't ask Mr. Yunus at this very particular time for another vacuum of other elections. I mean, you can't ask people in the middle of all those escalations to start other elections and to see another president and other government. What is the logic in this? I'll get back to you, Mr. Yunus. Mr. Osman, Israel maintains daily overflight and incursions into southern Lebanon. Now, how do this affect Lebanon's sovereignty and deterrence posture? And we're speaking here about a certain message Tel Aviv here is trying to send.
Just to clarify something, Mona, the Lebanese government is chosen by parliament, and so is the president. They have been elected by parliament, and parliament finishes its term in 2026. So elections are going to take place in Lebanon anyway, I think in mid-2026. So just to make that clear and get it out of the way. And as for the battlefield, or not battlefield, the how Israel conducts itself inside Lebanon at the moment, with the overflights of drones and reconnaissance aircraft over Lebanon, over Ba'abda Palace itself, as you just mentioned, the presidential palace. Of course, this is a very clear provocation by the Israelis, and they still continue their daily attacks on Lebanon, completely disregarding the ceasefire agreement, and also completely disregarding the UN Charter and international law, since Lebanon is a UN member state, and it's a state that is entitled to its own sovereignty. It's not an occupied state like Palestine. This is a whole other set of violations, but this is an even more grave violation in terms of international law, as this is a country that is independent and recognized as such by the international community. And the United States, which is the guarantor, along with France, of this ceasefire agreement, does absolutely nothing. Both of them, Paris and Washington, do absolutely nothing to maintain the peace and maintain this ceasefire and rein in the Israeli side. Israel apparently has a free hand in Lebanon, and the United States views Israel's actions as a means of pressure to pressure the Lebanese government and also to pressure Hezbollah in order to push forward this forced disarmament agenda, which, as I've said, is detrimental to Lebanon's stability by the way it wishes to be imposed. You know, Mona, I do support the disarmament of Hezbollah and concentrating all of the arms in the hands of the Lebanese state, as things should be. However, Lebanon is a country with very special circumstances, and this matter needs to be treated delicately and in a very level-headed and reasonable and calm manner to prevent an explosion inside Lebanon. But however, the Americans do not seem to be interested in investing in the long-term stability of Lebanon. They are rather more interested in ensuring Israel's absolute security or satisfying Israel's security needs in absolute terms, even if that is to be on the expense of countries like Syria and Lebanon, because we are seeing a very similar trend in Syria as well. So Israel cannot be allowed to dictate its terms by force in such a manner. However, unfortunately, the fact of the matter is it is allowed by the United States to do as such. And on the other hand, Iran is taking advantage of this in order to avert and redirect pressure on it. It seeks to use its proxies in the region, including Hezbollah and Lebanon, as a bargaining chip. So the arms of Hezbollah are a bargaining chip in negotiations or the nail-biting or finger-biting competition between the United States and Iran in the region. Iran utilizes Hezbollah, and unfortunately Hezbollah is acting in a manner that is completely besides the national interest of Lebanon as well. So and even the Lebanese government itself now is witnessing disagreements from within, according to reports, with the Prime Minister Nawaf Salam pushing hardly for the idea of the forceful disarmament or imposing this so-called American paper that supposedly has collapsed now, according to Nabih Berri, on Hezbollah, while the president of Lebanon, who is the former commander of the army and who seeks to unify the country, and he is, and I admire President Aoun greatly, is saying that no, things cannot be applied this way, and is resisting foreign pressure in so many ways. So Lebanon is in a very bad predicament now, Mona, and I think that the United States needs to rethink its strategy.
Right.
Since American paper failed, they need to rethink their strategy towards Lebanon if they are keen on the stability and unity of Lebanon.
So, Mr. Yunus, we're speaking here about elections to take place in 2026, so there will be elections by law. But the question is, how influential is Hezbollah's role within the parliament, the cabinet, on decisions related to disarmament or talks with Israel? This is from one side. And from the other side, how prepared is the Lebanese army to take control of the security of Lebanon?
Hezbollah's role within the Lebanese cabinet is highly influential, especially on any issue related to defense, disarmament, or indirect talks with Israel. So even though it is officially one political party among others, its military strength and popular base give it a dominant voice in national decision. So ministers allied with the Hezbollah, for example, or its political partners, often ensure that no government decisions contradicts the party's strategic interests. So particularly regarding its weapons and its role as part of the resistance. When discussions arise about disarming Hezbollah or limiting its activities in southern Lebanon, the cabinet faces an internal red line. The party insists that its weapons are not a domestic issue, but part of a national defense strategy
Right.
against Israel aggression.
Right. Mr.
So,
Yunus, briefly, because I'm running out of time, what is a message that you want here to say before we go? Because I'm out of time.
what?
What is the message? What is the message that you want to come out from here? And briefly, because I'm running out of time, please.
Yes, I mean that Hezbollah's presence in the cabinet also shapes Lebanon's response to international mediation.
So what should be done?
So
what should be done?
So I think that it reflects how deeply the party's influence extends beyond politics into the state's sovereignty itself. So Hezbollah also always asking about the violations that Israel are committed every day, while he is keeping silent from the ceasefire agreement.
Right.
So
I guess unity for
yes.
Right. Unfortunately, my time is out, and we thank you, Mr. Ahmed Yunus, researcher and political analyst, and Mr. Mohammed Osman for your valuable insights and helping us to understand the intricate balance Lebanon must maintain between diplomacy, defense, and survival. I guess that brings us to the end of today's episode of Think Tank. Many thanks for watching.